It was the summer of '97 when I first stumbled upon an ancient tome hidden deep within the dusty shelves of a used bookstore. The cover was old and worn, adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. The title, De Regno Salomonis, was etched in a language I couldn't understand. As I flipped through its yellowed pages, I felt an inexplicable sense of connection, as if the words on those pages were meant for me alone. I spent hours poring over the book, devouring every line and diagram. The text spoke of King Solomon's most powerful ritual, a summoning of eldritch horrors from beyond the veil of reality. I had always been fascinated by the occult, but this was different. This was power on a scale I couldn't comprehend. The book spoke of an ancient pact between Solomon and his demons, forged in blood and fire. It claimed that with the right tools and incantations, one could unlock the secrets of the cosmos and bend reality to their will. But at what cost? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched as I read those words. The store owner seemed to be hovering just out of sight, his eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. I packed up the book and left the store, but I knew I had only scratched the surface of something much larger. As I walked home, the city seemed different, the shadows cast by the streetlights twisted into grotesque forms that lurked just beyond the edge of perception. I quickened my pace, feeling a growing sense of unease. It was as if I had stumbled into a world where the laws of reality no longer applied. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with questions and doubts, but one thing was certain. I had to know more about King Solomon's ritual. And so, I began my journey down the twisted path of ceremonial magic, into a realm where darkness reigned supreme. It was a chilly autumn evening when I finally gathered the courage to delve deeper into the mysteries of King Solomon's ritual. I spent hours scouring the internet for any mention of the text, De Regno Salomonis, but most references were obscure and cryptic. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an online forum dedicated to ceremonial magic that I found a lead. A user named Astardi had posted a thread detailing their own research into the ritual. The post was dated several years ago, but the content seemed eerily relevant. Astarte claimed to have obtained a copy of the text through an underground network of occultists and was willing to share their findings with those who were serious about unlocking its secrets. I sent a message to Astardi, and after several days of silence, they responded with a cryptic invitation to meet in person. The location was a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town, and the only instructions were to bring the book, De Regno Salomonis, and a willing mind. I hesitated for hours, but my curiosity eventually won out. As I arrived at the warehouse, I noticed that the building seemed to be shrouded in an unsettling aura. The windows were boarded up, and the door creaked ominously as it swung open. Inside, Astardi was waiting for me, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. They led me through a maze of dimly lit corridors, finally stopping at a door hidden behind a tattered tapestry. The sign on the door read, "The Chamber of the King." Astardi pushed it open, revealing a room filled with strange artifacts and texts. In the center of the room, a single candle burned brightly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. It was then that I saw it, a large, leather-bound book lying open on a nearby pedestal. The pages were blank, except for a single phrase etched into the parchment. Solomon's seal. Astardi smiled as if they knew exactly what I was thinking. "This is where the real journey begins," they said, their voice dripping with an unsettling enthusiasm. And with that, they handed me the book, their eyes burning with an unnerving fervor. As I took the book from Astardi's hands, a shiver ran down my spine. The cover was made of a strange, scaly material that seemed to absorb the light around it, and the pages were yellowed with age. I gingerly opened the book, and a musty smell wafted out. The text within was written in a language I couldn't understand, but as I flipped through its pages, I noticed that certain passages were highlighted in red ink. Astarte followed my gaze and nodded in approval. "These are the most crucial sections," they said, their voice low and reverent. "They hold the key to unlocking Solomon's secrets." As I delved deeper into the book, I began to notice strange symbols etched into the margins. They seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they were alive. Astarte noticed my fascination and leaned in close. "These are the seals of the Ancient Ones," they whispered. "They hold the power to unlock the gates of hell itself." I felt a creeping sense of dread as I realized that I was holding something that could potentially unleash unspeakable horrors upon the world. But Astarte seemed to be enjoying my unease, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly excitement. They began to explain the ritual, describing how Solomon had used these very texts to bind his demons and bend reality to his will. As they spoke, I felt a strange connection forming between us, as if we were both being drawn into some dark and sinister world. The air in the room seemed to thicken, becoming heavy with anticipation. I knew that I was playing with forces beyond my control, but Astarte's enthusiasm was infectious. I found myself wanting to learn more, to unlock the secrets of the ancient texts and unleash their power upon the world. As Astarte continued to explain the ritual, I found myself becoming increasingly entranced. They spoke of Solomon's descent into madness, of how he had sacrificed everything for power and knowledge. The more I listened, the more I felt a sense of unease growing inside me. It was as if I was uncovering a dark secret that was meant to remain buried. Astarte seemed to be enjoying my discomfort, their eyes glinting with a knowing light. Solomon's ritual was not just about summoning demons, they said, their voice dripping with reverence. It was about unlocking the secrets of the universe itself. They spoke of ancient civilizations that had mastered the arts of magic and manipulation, of how these powers had been lost to the sands of time. I listened, mesmerized, as Astarte revealed a history of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge that seemed to stretch back centuries. The more I learned, the more I felt my grip on reality begin to slip. It was as if I was being pulled into a world where the laws of physics no longer applied, where the boundaries between good and evil were blurred beyond recognition. And yet, despite the growing sense of unease that threatened to consume me whole, I couldn't look away. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame, helpless to resist the allure of forbidden knowledge. Astarte seemed to sense my fascination, their smile growing wider as they leaned in closer. "The ritual is not just about summoning demons," they whispered, their breath hot against my ear. "It's about unleashing the darkness within ourselves." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized the true nature of what we were doing. We were playing with forces that threatened to destroy us all, and yet I couldn't help but feel drawn to the edge of the abyss. As the days passed, I found myself becoming increasingly consumed by my desire to learn more about Solomon's ritual. Astarte seemed to sense my desperation and began to share with me the most obscure and forbidden texts they could find. We spent hours poring over ancient tomes, searching for any mention of the ritual or its secrets. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay as we delved deeper into the world of magic and manipulation. I felt like a scholar on the brink of discovery, but also on the verge of madness. Astarte seemed to be enjoying my frustration, their eyes gleaming with a knowing light whenever I asked a question or made a guess. They would smile and nod as if to say "not quite yet," before revealing just enough information to keep me going. I began to feel like I was trapped in some kind of twisted game where the stakes were my very soul. But despite the risks, I couldn't help but be drawn deeper into the abyss. The more I learned, the more I felt my grip on reality begin to slip. I started to see visions of ancient civilizations and forbidden knowledge lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Astartes seemed to sense my growing unease and would often take me on long walks through the city, pointing out symbols and markings that held secrets and hidden meanings. They spoke of the power of language and the importance of understanding the underlying structures of reality. I began to feel like a student of the occult, learning the secrets of the universe one cryptic message at a time. And yet, despite my growing knowledge, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were upon us as we delved deeper into the heart of darkness. As I delved deeper into the world of ceremonial magic, I began to realize that we were not alone in our pursuit. The air seemed to thicken with an otherworldly presence, as if the very fabric of reality was being warped and twisted by our actions. Astartes spoke of the eldritch forces that lay beyond the veil of sanity, waiting to be summoned and harnessed. They spoke of the ancient deities who had once ruled over the world, their power and influence still felt in every corner of existence. I listened, entranced, as they described the intricate rituals and incantations that would allow us to tap into this power. The symbols and glyphs etched into the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they were alive and waiting for our permission to unleash their fury upon the world. Astartes led me through the ritual, guiding me through the intricate dance of gestures and incantations that would awaken the eldritch forces. The air was thick with anticipation, the very atmosphere seeming to vibrate with expectation. And then, in an instant, it was over. The ritual seemed to have reached a crescendo, as if we had stumbled upon some hidden threshold beyond which lay the abyss of madness and despair. Astartes smiled, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "We have made contact," they whispered, their voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. "The forces are stirring." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized the true nature of what we had accomplished. We had opened a door to a realm beyond our own, a realm where the laws of reality no longer applied, and the very fabric of existence was twisted and distorted. As we stood before the altar, Astartes' eyes locked onto mine with an unblinking stare. The ritual had reached its climax, and I felt myself being drawn into a vortex of madness and despair. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something else, something acrid and metallic that made my skin crawl. I tried to speak, but my voice was caught in my throat like a bird's egg. Astartes' hand closed around mine, their grip like a vice. "It is time," they whispered, their breath hot against my ear. "Time to let go of the world you know and step into the abyss." I felt a surge of fear as I realized that I was about to embark on a journey from which there was no return. The ritual had awakened something deep within me, a power that threatened to consume me whole. Astartes' eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire as they led me through the final incantation. The words were like a rusty gate scraping against my mind, opening up a chasm of madness and despair. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of my own psyche, where the darkness waited like a hungry predator. And then, in an instant, I was there at the edge of the abyss, staring into the void. The world around me dissolved into chaos, colors bleeding together like watercolors on wet paper. I felt myself falling through the void, with Astartes' laughter echoing behind me like a mocking echo. "Welcome to the other side," they said, their voice dripping with malevolence, "where the mad ones dance and the damned sing." I found myself standing in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Astartes stood before me, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "It is time," they said, their voice dripping with anticipation. "Time to summon the first of our guests." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized what was happening. We were about to unleash a being from beyond the veil of sanity, a being that would bring madness and despair into our world. Astartes handed me a small, leather-bound book. "This is the key of Solomon," they said. "With it, you will be able to bind the creature and keep it at bay." I took the book, feeling its weight in my hand like a promise of doom. As I opened it, the pages seemed to turn on their own, revealing ancient symbols and incantations that made no sense to me. Astartes led me through the ritual, guiding me through the intricate dance of gestures and words that would awaken the creature. The air was thick with anticipation, the very atmosphere seeming to vibrate with expectation. And then, in an instant, it was over. The ritual seemed to have reached a crescendo, as if we had stumbled upon some hidden threshold beyond which lay the abyss of madness and despair. Astartes smiled, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "The creature is coming," they said, their voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. I felt a surge of fear as I realized that I was about to face something beyond human comprehension. The door creaked open, and a figure loomed in the entrance. It was tall and gaunt, its skin like decaying flesh. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and I knew that I was staring into the face of madness itself. As the creature entered the room, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Astartes' eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as they led me deeper into the heart of madness. The air grew thick with an eerie, pungent scent that made my stomach churn. I stumbled forward, my legs trembling beneath me. The creature moved closer, its gaze fixed on me like a cold, calculating weight. I tried to speak, but my voice was frozen in my throat. Astartes' hand closed around mine, their grip like a vice. "Come," they whispered, their breath hot against my ear. "Let us descend into the darkness." I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness and despair. The world around me dissolved into chaos, colors bleeding together like watercolors on wet paper. I stumbled forward, blind and helpless, as Astartes led me deeper into the abyss. The creature moved ahead of us, its presence like a dark, palpable force that seemed to grow stronger with every step. I felt myself being drawn closer and closer, until I was standing at the edge of a great, yawning chasm. The air was cold and damp, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down upon me like a physical force. Astartes leaned forward, their eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "This is where the mad ones dwell," they whispered, "where the damned souls come to lose themselves in the void." And then, in an instant, I was standing on the edge of the chasm, staring into the abyss. The creature loomed behind me, its presence like a dark, living thing that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. I knew that I was one step away from being consumed by the darkness, and I felt a sense of despair wash over me like a cold, dark wave. As I stood at the edge of the chasm, staring into the abyss, I knew that I had to confront the consequences of my actions. The creature behind me seemed to sense my unease, and it took a step closer, its presence like a dark, living thing that seemed to fill the air with an unspeakable malevolence. Astartes' voice cut through the silence, their words dripping with an otherworldly menace. "You have unleashed this thing upon the world," they said. "Now you must face the consequences of your actions." I felt a surge of fear as I realized that I was not just facing a monster, but also the darkness within myself. The creature took another step closer, its eyes fixed on me like a cold, calculating weight. I raised my hands, feeling a sense of desperation wash over me. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Astarte's smile was like a cold, dark star, and it seemed to pierce the very soul of me. "We want your sanity," they said. "We want you to lose yourself in the void." And with that, the creature reached out and touched my forehead, its presence like a dark, palpable force that seemed to seep into my very being. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness and despair. The world around me dissolved into chaos, colors bleeding together like watercolors on wet paper. I was consumed by darkness, and I knew that I would never be the same again. As I stood at the edge of the chasm, staring into the abyss, I knew that I had to confront the consequences of my actions. The creature behind me seemed to sense my unease, and it took a step closer, its presence like a dark, living thing that seemed to fill the air with an unspeakable malevolence. Astarte's voice cut through the silence, their words dripping with an otherworldly menace. "You have unleashed this thing upon the world," they said. "Now you must face the final ritual." I felt a surge of fear as I realized that I was not just facing a monster, but also the darkness within myself. The creature took another step closer, its eyes fixed on me like a cold, calculating weight. I raised my hands, feeling a sense of desperation wash over me. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Astarte's smile was like a cold, dark star, and it seemed to pierce the very soul of me. "We want your soul," they said. "We want you to join us in the void." And with that, the creature reached out and touched my forehead, its presence like a dark, palpable force that seemed to seep into my very being. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness and despair. The world around me dissolved into chaos, colors bleeding together like watercolors on wet paper. I was consumed by darkness, and I knew that I would never be the same again. The ritual began, and I felt myself being drawn deeper into the abyss. The creature's presence grew stronger, its power coursing through my veins like a dark, lifeless fluid. I felt my mind slipping away, fragmenting into 1,000 shards of madness. And yet, even as I was consumed by darkness, I knew that I was not alone. Astarte stood beside me, their eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. Together, we descended into the void, our souls merging into a single dark entity. The ritual ended, and I felt myself being pulled back into the world of the living. But something had changed within me. I was no longer the same person who had begun this journey. I was now a part of something greater, something darker and more sinister. And I knew that I would never be able to escape the void again. The darkness closed in around me, and I felt myself being pulled back into its depths. But even as I was consumed by the shadows, I knew that I had found something truly terrible and wonderful. I had found a new existence, one that would haunt me for eternity, and I knew that I would never be free from its grasp again. The final ritual ended, and I stood at the edge of the abyss, staring into the void. I was no longer human, but a creature of the darkness, forever bound to the will of Astarte, and I knew that I would always be drawn back to the void like a moth to a flame. The darkness closed in around me, and I felt myself being pulled back into its depths. But even as I was consumed by the shadows, I knew that I had found something truly terrible and wonderful. I had found a new existence, one that would haunt me for eternity. And so I stood at the edge of the abyss, staring into the void. I was no longer human, but a creature of the darkness, forever bound to the will of Astarte, and I knew that I would always be drawn back to the void, like a moth to a flame. The last transmission. The darkness closed in around me, and I knew that it would never let me go. I was trapped in a world of madness, forever bound to the will of Astarte. As I stood at the edge of the abyss, staring into the void, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had found what I had been searching for all along, the ultimate power and knowledge. But it came at a terrible cost. My mind was shattered, my soul consumed by the darkness. I was no longer human, but a creature of the void. And yet, even in my madness, I knew that I would never be alone. Astarte's presence was always with me, guiding me, manipulating me. I thought back to the journey that had brought me here. The countless rituals, the sacrifices made in my name, it had all been worth it, for I had become something more than human. I became a vessel for the void, a portal to the infinite darkness that lay beyond the veil of reality. And with that knowledge came a sense of power and freedom. I was no longer bound by the constraints of humanity. I could do what I wanted, go where I pleased. The world was mine to command. But as I stood at the edge of the abyss, staring into the void, I knew that there was one final transmission left to make. A message to those who would follow in my footsteps, to those who would seek to unlock the secrets of the void. I took a deep breath and began to speak. My voice was low and husky, the words echoing through the void like a dark incantation. "I am the last transmission," I said. "I am the final vessel for the void, and I will guide you on your journey into the depths of madness and despair." The darkness closed in around me, and I knew that it would never let me go. But I didn't care, for I had found what I had been searching for all along, the ultimate power and knowledge. And with that knowledge came a sense of peace, a sense of acceptance. I was no longer human, but a creature of the void, and I knew that I would always be drawn back to it, like a moth to a flame.